Got a customer one day. He fished the year before. A guy part-time. He was fussing at me a little bit. Well, it really is fussing at the fish. Because the year before, we started immediately catching fish, eating size fish I'm talking, pound to 2 or 3 pounds. And that next year, that 5-hour evening trip wasn't quite as exciting to start off with. And that's okay because that's fishing, folks. Well, he didn't like that, and he was kind of complaining about it. I said, Mr. Jim, I said, look up there. He said, what? There's a big bald eagle sitting up there on a tree. I said, fish is biting. We wouldn't even seen that eagle. So don't go out there thinking every day that you got to catch. That's not what it's all about. Some days you go out there and learn and get humbled down to your shoestrings. And then the next day you go out there, you may not can keep them knocked off the hook, right? We've all been there if we fished very long or hunted very long or did anything in the outdoors. Some days everything just goes our way, and then some days they don't, right? All right. So I'm going to talk about, are we getting close to 3 o'clock now? Official start time? 3 minutes? What I'd like to talk about today is my favorite topic, drift fishing. And I want to throw a little thing in there about integrity of our sport. And then some guys ask me about, well, how do you go about getting sponsors? If any of you want to stay for that, I'll be glad to share what's worked for me over the years, and it's worked really well. I've shared it with bass fishermen, catfishermen, and I'll share it with you if you care to email me and ask me for the outline of it. I'll share my resume with you. Okay, so I'm going to get started. We're going to start at the, I call it the grassroots level, and we're going to start out and we're going to talk through the rig. Okay, 30-pound test here. This is my standard leader length. I don't care if I'm fishing the Ohio River, Mississippi River, the Tennessee River, bumping the bottom. Okay, I've got 30-pound test for my lead leader. I use a 3-way swivel that don't swivel very well. Then I come down and I use a Luxon chain swivel that swivels real well, and it eliminates about 90 to 99% of the line twist. Then I snell, depending on what size fish I'm fishing for, I snell 2 Daiichi hooks, wide gap circle hooks. I can still, ooh, they're sharp. They're still sharp. Anyway, I got that one snelled really good. Anyway, eliminate line twist. That means come in from being anchored or drifting, everything's in a big wad up here. Yep. Say so, yep. This right here will eliminate most all of that. If you're very careful when you drop the sinker in the water and let the current pull this out of the way, you'll never come in with all this wadded up in the water again, I promise. And it actually lets it swivel. And another thing I believe this does for you is it disperses a little more scent when you mash that bait or you cut it a certain way to make it bleed out more. That bait's sitting there twirling, I believe it'll disperse a little more scent. So that comes up to here. So what I use here, I've got 60-pound mono big game, or on the Mississippi I like to use a fluorocarbon leader. Reason being, a lot more debris, a lot more cables, a lot more rip, wrap, revetment, whatever you want to call it on the Mississippi. A lot more things out there to braid your line, okay? Up here on the business end, I've got 80-pound spider wire ultracast, okay? A lot of good lines. Use the one that you like. This one's worked well for me. Okay. I like to keep several rigs pre-tied in my boxes. If I break one off, I chuck it down. I've got a stainless steel swivel. I get these out of Cabela, so I just mash it. I get in my box. These are, a walleye fisherman made these for catfishermen. They call them walleye snell rigs in the catalog. And you can put 18 or so of these in a box, and break one off, you just pop the box open, unravel it, get it unraveled. Takes just that long. Put a bait on, put a sinker on, I'm back in the water fishing. Who wants to spend all their time out there watching themselves tie a rig up when they could be fishing? None of us? See some smiles back there. I don't either. So when I'm out there on the water, I work just like a lot of you. I have a real job, my wife says. You go to that real job first, and then you go fishing, right? I don't know what yours tells you, but that's what mine does. Anyway, so we want to spend all our time, our valuable time that we have to be out there on the water, we want to spend it fishing, right? So I don't care. There's a lot of different tying rigs out there where you can pre-tie them, sitting at home at night, watch TV or whatever, tie these up. All right. Let me go back to the lead leader just a moment. There are days when those catfish are setting tighter to the bottom, so on those days I just clip this off, and then I shorten my leader to 12, 24, 18 inches. I want to get it down there a little closer. If I'm not getting bit with a 3-foot leader, I'm going to get it down there a little closer to him, okay? At weather conditions I've heard of some folks talk about dictate that. They may be holding tighter to the bottom than they were the day before, for example, right? All right. So now we're all rigged up. Let's talk about the rods a little bit. A lot of good rods out there. I'm going to talk in 3 phases. Medium heavy, heavy, and extra heavy. I prefer graphite, and I prefer a through blank rod. It just gives me that extra feely touchy, if you will. Keith Sutton, when he fished with me, he wrote about it. He called it a finesse way to catfish. So it's a very touchy-feely. So some people like to bump and put their fingers on their line. I like to bump and have my finger on the through blank on the rod because I can feel immediately when that sinker hits the bottom. One thing you don't want to do, it doesn't matter which kind of rod you have, when that sinker first makes contact with the bottom when you're learning to bump, the worst thing it can do is that right there after it makes contact. So what happens then, you lose contact with the bottom, okay? And then you try to pick it back up, and guess what? It's already wrapped around a root ball or a rock or a small limb on the bottom and you're hung up, right? And a lot of times for you beginners starting out to bump the bottom, especially if you're bumping or fishing with somebody that's been back bumping or bumping the bottom for quite some time and they're used to it, and you notice, well, they got a 3-ounce sinker on, put on the same thing. Probably what you need to do is start out with a little bit heavier sinker to get tuned into that bottom, because the bottom has contours, right? It goes up and down, and then sometimes you hit that drop off from 40 to 60 or 70 feet. You've got to walk it down that contour, because those fish sometimes, for example, will be tucked right down that drop. They could be at the very bottom of it. They could be at the middle of the hole. They could be at the back of the hole, okay? So make sure you stay close to that bottom when you're going down those drops, because a lot of times the more aggressive fish will be setting up higher than the lesser aggressive fish on those drops. Let me get back on the rod. So the medium heavy rod, let me just describe it, and I'm talking in bass rod terms because that's mostly what we have to look at, except for the guys that got rods out here. But the medium heavy action is good for 0 to 1 to 1.5 mile-an-hour current. The medium action rod or the heavy action rod that you'll see, that's more of a 2 to 2.5 mile, 3 mile-an-hour current. This rod right here is extra heavy graphite. You can fish up to probably 32 ounces anchored in an old skipjack if you're man or woman enough to handle that all day. So that's the 3 grades of rods that I like to use drifting. These are just happen to be the signature series Mr. Tom Knox makes for me in Kansas City. You're welcome to look him up on the website, and if you don't like my series of rods, he can make any rod you want, okay? He can make you a custom rod. But these they work well. Caught a 103-pounder on one just like that one in the Mississippi River, so it does work. And okay, so now we've covered the rod, from the sinker back to the rod. Again, I've got ambassadors and I've got Dakota Shimano reels. I use the Ambassadors mostly for fishing the Tennessee River. I can bump the Mississippi River with them, but when I typically go on the Mississippi River, I'll load up my Dakotas and I'll go with them. Better drag, heavier reel to bump all day. And that's one thing I left off on the rods. Well, a couple things. Let me go back. Okay? You don't want a rod that's got a short handle. Why? Because when the fish hits, he's going to jerk it out of your hand. It's going to go kaplunk. You got a long handle rod and the fish hits really hard, it'll go up under your armpit and lodge, and you're not going to lose your rod versus a short handle rod. Another thing that you will learn when you get my age is ergonomics play a big factor. Tendonitis, the arthritis right here. You youngsters out there, if you'll start out with the largest handle rod you can find, you won't clench your fist all day holding onto that rod when you're bumping. That's what causes this tendonitis and arthritis when you get later years. So that's a big oversized foam handle, and there's a reason for that, to keep you from clenching your fist all day like that. Because you got 5 tendons right there, and every time you squeeze that 5 times, it works this one tendon one time and it eventually wears out. So ergonomics, the older you get, will play a bigger factor in your fishing, believe it or not. Didn't bother me a bit when I started out below Pickwick Dam with a fiberglass rod about that big around and a big old Del Mar reel that weighed about 4 pounds. I see him laughing back there, he did it too. And then I used about a 6 or 8 ounce sinker to fish that 3.5 mile an hour current coming out of the turbines there. It eventually wears all this stuff out. So when you start out, I encourage you to go as light as you can and as strong as you can for the current you're going to fish. Okay, so where can you drift fish? You can drift fish right below dams. That's where I cut my teeth and learn. Only thing that you need to remember below the dam, you need to go to about a 6 to 8 inch lead leader, because those fish are in such a current up there, they have to hold tight to the bottom, okay? You get down the river 6 or 7 miles, you can go back to that 3-foot leader. Another advantage to that 3-foot leader, as long as the fish will hit it, is if you feel structure with that sinker as you're bumping down the bottom, walking your bait up here, a fish will come up to eat more than he'll. If your bait was below the fish, he's not likely to go down, okay? So, and it does a couple things. It lets your sinker get in that structure, and you got a 30-pound leader on that, so you can break that free. Not a big deal to tie another sinker on. It's a big deal to tie up those rigs and have to put a whole rig on, right? All right, so we can fish below the dams, find the current seams, the current edges, and then I had a real good question back there, and James Patterson taught me a lot about this, and I appreciate James, Harold Dodd, and a lot of others that took me under their wing early on and helped me on the Mississippi River. And they said, one of the best things James ever told me, he says, I was trying to figure out how to fish the mighty Mississippi. Tennessee River's 300-400 yards wide. The lake's a half mile wide. When you pull up to Memphis to the pyramid, you're looking about a mile of river. And you're going, where do I fish, right? Where in the world do I start? That's what I was asking the first day I went up there. And I rode around with my little Humminbird 7-inch screen, and I put a bunch of blue dots on it that day. Tim Haney back there, he was with me. Mr. Dance was riding around with us. And we was just riding around looking. Saw James later down the river, and I think we went back and fished some of those spots, and we caught a 70 and a 72 and a 55 and maybe a 40 that day, and several smaller fish. We just out there having a good time. I, one, was learning about the Mississippi River, and I was learning about my GPS and everything, so that's the fun days, right? When you go out there and you're not really trying to accomplish something, you're just out there trying to learn how to run your depth finder, out there with friends, see James, wave at him, talk to him, and go on down the river and fish some more. That's good times, okay? So when you go out there, it doesn't matter if you're fishing a small river or a big river, it doesn't matter. you're going to fish them basically the same. They're all going to have some unique features in the bends, inside, outside. Sometimes right out in the middle of the river is the best place to fish. So there's probably no best place to fish because the fish move in and out. They'll move shallow, they'll move deep, they'll move to the middle of the river, they'll move to the other side of the river. So just picture it as a baseball plate. Just think of it as you as a pitcher pitching a baseball. Where do they pitch? They'll pitch the edges, which will be the inside or the outside bend. And then sometimes they'll throw it right down the gut and somebody knock a home run, right? Think of your fishing. That's how you pick a big area of water apart. Fish the outside edge, first drop off, first big drop where it makes that U-turn, fish that edge. Come out 30, 40 yards, move over 30, 40 yards, and then get to the other edge. You kind of fish that just like a pitcher will fish a baseball plate, right? So you fish that area thoroughly, and just like Joe Lucky said up there, you trying to catch the active fish. Okay, let's say I fished the outside bend and I've caught 4 or 5 fish and they quit biting. I move over to the other side and I'm marking fish, but I'm not catching any. No big deal, right? Go down the river, fish another hole. You may come back 2 hours later and those fish be active on that side of the river and they're biting for you. So just because you see them on that depth finder doesn't mean they're ready to eat, right? And they're in the mood to eat. So you may have to come back a couple hours later to that spot. One thing that I noticed that was wrong, and an old fisherman told me this one time, and I was below Pitwick Dam, and I strongly encourage you not to ever do this. If you're drifting and you're catching fish, never ever run back over them with a boat motor, especially bluecat. 70 feet of water, I've seen them lock up and just quit biting for 2 hours. Anybody had that experience? Yep. Okay, so I drift to an area, drop off 70 feet, catch a 48 pounder. 3 or 4 boats right there and they all pile in, run right across the top of them with a 10, 15 horse motor. Ying, 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 ying. Guess what? I made 2 or 3 more drills. They made 2 or 3 drills and they said, what happened to them? I said, I don't know. I just went on down the river, fished another hole. I came back, started catching some big fish again. Fish was still sitting there. I could see them on my depth finder. But a blue cat doesn't tolerate a lot of commotion and noise running right over top of his house. Be like me coming to your house, sir, getting on my 4-wheeler and cutting squirrelies and donuts in your wife's living room. She wouldn't like that either, right? Blue cat's the same way. Channel cat, a little different. And the only way I know how to tell you this and describe it to you is I used to fish trot lines. On a night when we had electrical storms like we had last night, we would load up on channel cat and we might have 1 or 2 blues out of the whole bunch. So again, that's how and why I believe blue cats don't like a lot of commotion, because I've seen it with the weather systems coming through. Okay, so always go around your drifting area, get on the front end of it, make your drift through with your trolling motor, come out, go around, and you'll catch fish till the fish get tired of biting in that area. Then move on down the river. But if you run back across them with that big motor, they will quit pretty quick, especially blue cat. Channel will tolerate a little more than a blue, but he'll eventually quit biting in shallow water. Okay. Baits, shad guts, fillets off of shad, whole shad, half shad, quarter shad, skipjack, same thing. Head, the half bodies, 3/4 body. However big he'll eat is what I want to put in the water. If he'll eat a whole skipjack, I'll put him in the water. But if he wants a small 2-inch fillet, I'm going to put that in the water. When they're on the bed spawning, a lot of times you have to go down to a small enough fillet where they can get a hook in the handle. Otherwise, they just pick it up, pull you over here and drop your bait. I've seen that happen on the Ohio River, Tennessee, and the Mississippi. But most time when they're truly spawning, you can't catch them because they're in a hole up under something and you can't get a bait to them when they're truly spawning. That's why they disappear in June in my area of the year, river, in June till about second week in July when they come off the bed. They're extremely difficult to catch. So that's a kind of off period for the big blues on my stretch of the river. Back to the hooks, I left off one thing. I do believe in snell knot. If you're not snelling your hooks, I don't care what kind you're using, J hooks, Kell hooks, circle hooks, if you're not snelling them, you're probably losing 25 to 50% of the fish that are biting. Joe said he demonstrated. You can go on the internet and type in snell knot and fishing, and you'll find all kind of demonstration, photo by photo, how to do it. It takes 10 seconds to snell a hook. It's not really a knot, it's just a route, and you get it correctly. I can show you. That's what that one did a while ago when it stuck the end of my finger bleeding. It fired off just like I'm fixing to show you.
Want a Band-Aid?
Nah, I'm gonna be good. No, I don't need a Band-Aid. I just should have been watching what I was doing, because these are sharp, just like yours. But if you snell it correctly, they're gonna fire into what you're catching. And that's why you want to use a snell knot. Okay, so if you look at that hook, it's kind of cocked like a trigger. I describe it like a trigger on a gun. So when pressure's put on it, when a fish pulls on it, I don't have to set the hook, because when the fish turns, that hook wraps around. It's just like wrapping around my finger, and the hook buries up in the jaw of that fish to about right there. That's the beauty of a snell knot. If you're not using it, start using it, and your catch rate's going to go up, I'd guess, at least 25% when you start doing that. Anybody want a 25% increase automatically? I do. And then tournaments, we kept up, Tim and I've kept up with it. Some days, 1 2-day tournament, I believe we got 10 bites in 2 days. And we put every one of them in the boat. And this right here is my explanation on why we did. Not a lot of bites in a 2-day or 1 day, but that's all we got on the Mississippi River. She was very generous to us. We ended up winning it, but a lot of times you don't get a lot of bites. Okay? But that snell knot is a critical piece. Probably one of the best tips, if you don't pay any attention to anything I've said today, that snell knot is probably one of the best ones I got. So, with that, I just want to talk a little bit about integrity. We got a great sport. It's growing. I've never seen so many people in one building in my life coming through looking at catfish equipment this morning. It thinned down around a little bit around dinner, but this is amazing compared to what was going on back in the 1990s when we first started. This is amazing. Y'all are all truly amazing. And I'm going to compliment the catfishermen a little bit more. I had a boat dealer the other day. He said, boy, he said, you know, these catfishermen are different. He said, they come in the boat store and they're just as nice and humble, and they talk about what they want on their boat, and it's just a real enjoyable discussion to deal with a catfisherman buying a boat. And I'm not going to mention who's not nice to them, but that's good. That's a good thing for our sport. And that ties right into what I want to say next, integrity. A lot of you don't fish tournaments. You don't care anything about fishing tournaments. That's fine. I do, and I love the competition. It just gets me fired up. When I first started, I couldn't sit down and eat my breakfast. I like 2 eggs scrambled, 2 pieces of bacon, 2 biscuits smothered with white gravy. That's called the Mississippi heart attack breakfast. I couldn't even eat it. The first morning, I competed with Snuffy Smith on the Tennessee River, and you don't know him. But he's a great fisherman. I have a lot of respect for him. But I would get so nervous when I started fishing tournaments that I couldn't hardly eat my breakfast. And that's how fired up I get about fishing a tournament. I can eat my breakfast now without getting nauseated, but I still enjoy tournament fishing. But what I'm about to say is any sport. It doesn't matter what sport it is. Keep that integrity at a high level. There's nothing worth winning that you didn't earn or you didn't abide by the rules. There's nothing worth winning. because there's nothing there. And then you don't, if you do it with integrity and keep everything on the up and up and follow the rules, you feel good about every win. And I guarantee you, if you work hard enough and you're persistent at it, you're going to win as many tournaments as you care to win. But it takes a lot of hard work. I heard Joe Leckie say, there's nothing, folks, that beats time on the water. You can read on the internet, you can sit in these seminars, and that's good, but there's nothing beats time on the water. And nobody can tell you when to move, when to change baits. You've got to get out there on the water and develop that yourself. And your time will come, I assure you, if you put the work and effort into it and keep that integrity at that high level in the sport. And it will continue to grow as long as we all do that. The last thing I want to talk about a little bit, and again, this may not interest very many people in the crowd. How do you go about getting sponsors? Well, what I did is I picked out some products that I was already using. I didn't understand what Abu for Life meant when I picked up that first Abu 42 years ago in that box, that 5500 CA that I bought to Snacks Poo Bill on the bank that night. But now I know, because it's 40 years old and I can still carry it out there and use it. Yeah, I have to replace a pawl every 4 to 5 years. I've never replaced a worm gear in them, because when my pawl goes bad, I lay it down and get another one. I grease it quite often, so my pawl lasts about 4 years. They'll last about 7 in that Shimano. But anyway, back to the tournament thing, sponsors. If you've got a product like Abu or Daiichi hooks or something that you believe in, it's real easy to promote it. And if you win a few tournaments, that's great. You don't have to win a tournament one to have sponsors. You can just go out there and be professional and talk to other folks coming up in the sport about those products, tell them why you use them, why they work for you, and guess what? You can get sponsored. It's not about how much you won. It's nothing about you. It's about how you can help promote that product. Sea Art boat, for example. When I went and got my first Sea Art boat, Steve, he's here, he's out on the floor. He said, do you think of anything else we need for a catfish boat? I said, Steve, y'all have been listening to the catfishermen. Y'all have got the big live well, the spray and liner to make cleaning them up easier. You got everything we need here. And they still adding stuff. I got a boat the other day and they put that splash and lockable battery area back there on the back of your boat so somebody can yank your batteries out and be gone with them in 5 minutes. But anyway, something like that you can promote and believe in, have faith in, that's easy things to promote. It ain't going out there, well, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I've done that. It's not all about I, it's about what you can do to help them. When you get that part right, the sponsors will come to you, I assure you. And I've got a resume out there, if any of you want it. I've got a card up here, business card, and you can email me and I'll forward you that blank resume. If you're wanting to get started and when you're wanting to seek sponsors in the future, I'll be glad to help you. I've helped bass fishermen, I've helped other catfishermen, and I started out helping myself there by writing my own. So I know it works. Now, I've said my little spiel, so I'm ready for questions, I guess. Any questions out there about the rigging or the drill?
On your riggers, is that a small chain or what is that? Beads or?
It's called. He said, "What is that on my rig?" It's called a Luxon chain swivel.
One of the swivels and your. Let me see it.
It's called a Luxon chain swivel. They come 50 to a pack in Cabela. You can order them online. They're not usually in the store.
That's a bead setup, okay.
And they used to put the pound test on them in the catalog.
Used to buy them with swivels on them. Used to buy them with swivels on each side.
Yeah, there's different kinds of them out there. There's a 4-bead, there's a 6-bead, and then there's some others that swivel real well. But these right here are, I don't know what pound test they are, but I know they'll hold 103 and get him in the boat. So that's a very helpful tool.
You running 2 baits on that rig or just one?
Yeah. When I'm fishing the lighter current areas like Tennessee River, I put another set of hooks 3 feet up, so I've got, and that's a good point you brought up there. That's one of the biggest misconceptions about catfish. Everybody thinks they're bottom feeders. They're not. I just heard Doc talk about seeing blues bust the top of the water. I've seen it too, but I've also caught fish suspended on Pickwick, for example, 65, 70 feet of water, catch them 45 feet off, down from the surface. So they're 20, 25 feet off the bottom. So they're not bottom feeders. They like to lay on the bottom, be lazy.
Now, do the big ones run in packs like the small ones?
I say a lot of times what I've seen is you'll see some bigger fish staged up on a drop, and you go through there, you might catch a 18 the first one, you might catch a 40 the next one, and go back to 27. Where we caught the 103 pounder, we caught a couple of 14s, a 16, caught a 32, and then the 103 pounder bit. And the next day we went in there and caught one fish out of that area, and it was a 57 or a 58. So, 14-pound fish is not all that big. And the reason I say that, there's a guy fishing on Wilson Lake in Alabama. He weighed a 40-pound fish in, he thought. And when he got scaled, it only weighed 30. Went back to his live well and he spit up a 10-pound blue. So they like me. They like to eat a lot when they eat. That's why they look like that, some of them.
Do any day.
There you go. There you go. They like to eat a lot when they eat, and then they like to lay around 2 or 3 days and let that digest. Yes, sir.
You touched on it real quick where you didn't want your slack in the line. And I was talking to Larry Muse, and he says treat that bottom like it's on fire, that it'll melt your weight. Is that what you're talking about? Is just touching the bottom and don't let it get down in there? Just
Right.
Is that what you meant? No slack in the line?
Yeah, his question is, why do you want to keep that line tight when you're bumping the bottom down through there? One reason is you can feel a contour change. So if you bump back there and you start feeling slack, there's something coming up most of the time. If you're bumping back there and you don't feel anything, then one of two things happen. The fish has grabbed it coming up the river, or you just went off a foot or 2, 3 foot drop off. So then you got to let out a little line. But don't sit out there and let out 30, 40 feet of line, because most drop offs are not that severe.
Okay, so if it slacks up on you, it's climbing up now. Do I reel in?
Yeah, sometimes either reel in, or you'll have to lift your rod tip up and hold your
And if
thumb.
it's getting up too high, I gotta take some out of it.
Yeah, you'll pick it up and walk it over that step, like that step right there, right there in front of you.
Yeah, 'cause you just touched on that real quick where you said, don't let your line get like that. That's telling me that it's coming up on me then?
It could be. All right, let me stretch it out there again. All right, so if I'm bumping up and I hit that little curb right there and I ease my rod down a little bit more, I'm gonna start going slack. So I know I've come up against that curb. So I've got to pick it up another little bit to get it up over that hump or that log underwater. And with all this side scan and stuff now, if you got that little rock sticking up or that log laying crossways in the river, you know you're coming up on structure, and you know you're going to have to pick it up to get it over it, because if you let it slide down in it, it's just like I said, trot lines, anchor ropes, forks of tree limbs, they lodge on anything that's sticking up off the bottom of the river, and they build up. And when you hit that, if you don't walk up over it, you're going to be hung up and tying on rigs all day. Right? Does that help?
So anytime you feel slack, you gotta get off it right away.
Yeah, you've either come up on a curb or there's a fish got it coming up the river.
Okay.
A lot of times on the Mississippi or Ohio, they'll take off up the river and put a lot of slack in your line. And a bluecat is notorious for coming straight up off the bottom. So that's a hard bite to catch, by the way. It brings up another point. So when you feel a lot of slack in your line, most people are going to reel down and do the TV hook set from down there to back here at 1 o'clock. And they'll feel a little bit of fish, but when he feels that, he's going to drop it. And you're going to miss most of them. What I've learned over the years is to When that fish puts slack in the line, it doesn't matter where he's at. Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio, they'll all do it. A blue cat's notorious for it. What I think the reason he does that, I'm gonna add this. I think he's got his buddy down there and he's wanting the same bait and he's gonna grab it and run it away from him. So he just takes straight off up. So when he does that, you just wanna start reeling slow. And when you feel him, he gonna feel you at the same time. He's gonna turn and go back down. He's hung himself. Then all you gotta do is reel him in. So you could be coming up on a log, but a fish, if you feel a real subtle thump, that's the key thing that I was trying to explain early on. You gotta have a sensitive rod. The spider wire, there's no stretch to it, so you can feel every little subtle thing in the river bottom, and you can feel those little subtle bites. A big fish, every time, does not necessarily give you that pole bending straight down in the water bite, does he? That big fish, if you think about this, saw a video with James, a 50-pound flathead, or blue, either one, you can stick both fists in his mouth. So what's that fish got to do if you're walking a bait down the river and he's sitting here? All he's got to do is open his mouth and clamp down on it. That's a very subtle bite. Maybe he's just lazy that day, or maybe he just ate 4 skipjack. I don't know. But some days they'll come up there and it's just so subtle. It's just like somebody lightly laying their hand on your shoulder. That's all you feel. That's another reason for the spider wire and a very sensitive graphite rod. A lot of people miss those bites with a fiberglass rod or trying to fish those solid fiberglass rods we used to. We missed a lot of those fish. But with the equipment you got nowadays and the spider wire, or the braided lines, let me just say the braided lines because there are all a lot of good brands out there. But there's no stretch to them. There's no need to do the TV hook set, start at 4 o'clock, end up at 1 o'clock. All you have to do when that fish inhales that bait is start reeling. And when you feel tension, just tighten that rod up. That's all you got to do. He'll be hooked as good as he ever was. And then you'll take a chance on tearing the hook plumb out of him when you do the TV hook set, I call it. Question? Yes, young man.
I was wondering how many bearings you have in your 2 rods that you have.
How many bearings do I have in the reels?
Yes, sir.
That's a good question. I don't really know. Anybody know what's in a 6500 or a Dakota? I know the Dakota's smoother, so the Dakota's got a sealed gear in there, so there's no way that nothing can get in there. They told us if you want to wash it out, you had to hook a water hose to it, spray it up in there. So this is a sealed bearing, like a bearing in a motor or a machine. But the Ambassador 6500's got ball bearings, and I'm not sure how many, young man. But that does make for a smoother reel, one with more ball bearings. It's a very good point.
You mentioned about getting tangled up. You said you wouldn't get tangled up if you were careful how you dropped it in.
Right.
In the beginning, what?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna bring it back here. He asked, how do you keep this from coming back in a big wad, tangled up, I called it. So if I'm fishing a river that's got current, I'll drop my sinker in. I make sure those 2 lines are separated, number one, because if you drop them in like this, the first thing they're gonna do is hang up. So I drop my sinker in, and I keep easing it down because it's got tension on it. The current hits this one, it pulls it out, and then my bait starts twirling. That way, on the get-go, or when I first drop it in, it's not tangled up, and it will stay untangled while I'm bumping down through there or anchored. Doesn't matter, because the luxing or the chain swivel kicks in and keeps all this from not. 3-way swivel is not what it's named. It just doesn't swivel very, very well at all. But this chain swivel and some other swivels out there, a crane swivel will do the same thing. This will do a better job. Crane swivel being one that's just got one ball bearing in the middle. Okay? Yes, sir.
That 2-hook setup, is that fishing 2 different baits or one big bait hooked twice?
That's a real good question. He said this double rig, am I fishing 2 baits with that, or I'm just fishing one big one? I'm gonna answer your question two ways. First question, I can fish a hand size or a little bit bigger bait with that rig. You see how I've got them spread out just about for a hand size bait. All right, so the second part of his question is, are you fishing two baits? A lot of times for blue cats, that's a good idea. I like to hang the gut here, and I like to put a 4 or 5 inch fillet here. So some days, and I've already heard other fishermen say it up here, catfish will tell you what they prefer. Some days they want a gut and a fillet. Some days they want the head. Some days they want side cross section of the fish. Some days they want the whole thing. So always manipulate your baits. That's a good point that I usually bring up. We're not like bass fishermen, crappie fishermen. We can't run down the store and get some chartreuse, some white, some curly tails, and some sparkle tails. We don't have that option. So what I encourage you to do, sir, is manipulate your bait upside, downside. I've already heard that, and that is true, because he don't always want that big piece of bait. He's like me. I can eat pizza once a week, but I don't really care for it 7 days a week. Do y'all? Fish is the same way. So upside, downside, shad, skipjack, beef liver, chicken breast, dyed with put some garlic in there and some cherry or strawberry food color. You'll be amazed sometimes what you'll catch on that. So just manipulate your baits, use different baits. I strongly encourage you to carry 2 or 3 baits with you when you're out fishing. Also, something else somebody asked earlier in another seminar, what I always encourage people when they go on a guide trip and they say, I'm just here to learn. And I teach them what little bit I know about the depth finder, about rigging and rod and reels. Because I've got a closet full of that stuff that don't work, folks. What I shared with you today works. So I've already been through the trial and error. But what I encourage them more so to do, when you're out there fishing, always go try to find a new spot every day you go. And guess what? How fast your list of good spots will grow if you do that. One spot, one extra spot, try a new area every time you go. And your little book will start building, or your GPS coordinates will get up to 17 or 1800 before you know it, okay? So that's how you learn. Time on the water. Watching Phil King or James Patterson, that doesn't teach you a whole lot. We've shared and we've tried to teach you things that work for us, but sitting on the bank with binoculars is not going to teach you a whole lot. I never learned it that way. I don't think James learned it that way, and other folks didn't learn it that way. But that time on the water cures a lot of ailments for fishing. Sure does. Any other questions, sir? Yes, sir?
Now, say you're going to fish a known dike, 60 foot of water.
Yeah.
When you come up on that dike, are you going to cut your big motor and use your trolling motor to come into it and anchor, or are you going to scan it and then? Because you said the blues are sensitive and.
Yeah. That's a good question there. Probably if I had enough confidence in where I wanted anchor and I already had a historical GPS coordinate on my anchor and my boat position, I might just go around it and drop my anchor on that first coordinate, drop back till I got to the other one. If I had that much confidence in that dike, for example, I'd caught 50 pounders, 60 pounders the same time of the year, I probably wouldn't bother scanning it. I'd just go in there and anchor up and give them 30 minutes. What the heck's 30 minutes, right? If I had the confidence in that dike that time of the year, I probably wouldn't worry about scanning it if that's one I wanted to fish, and I've historically caught several good fish. Because it's just like this, a fish, you catch a fish off a spot one day, it may be a week or 2 weeks before you catch another 50 or 60 pounder, but another fish is going to like that same area. He feels secure there. That's why he's there, I believe. He's not there because it's a dike. It's something there, food, security, cover, just the right current speed. I don't know, but there's something there he likes. And you didn't catch him there by accident. There's something, and it'll attract another big fish and another big fish, for example, right? I missed somebody over here. Yes, sir?
Do you vary the distance of your hooks?
I do, depending on the size of the bait I'm wanting to use.
Okay.
For eating fish, I put them 2 inches apart. I use 2 3/0 Daiichis. All right, if I'm on a fish, a bigger fillet and a gut, I'll go to 2 5/0, about 6 inches apart. And then what I just showed you, a hand-sized bait or bigger, I'm gonna put them further apart. The danger, when you start going much bigger than your hand size, that fish is smart enough to grab it between them hooks, and you'll come in and the gut will be tore out of him, or you'll see a big lip print in that bait about the size of your thumb. There is a danger when, if that fish is not real aggressive and he don't inhale that bait and eat it, that's the danger of reeling him in, getting a good fight for about 15 seconds, and all of a sudden your line goes limp. Guess what? That blue cat is strong enough, his jaws are strong enough, if he don't get that hook behind that jaw, his jaws are strong enough to turn that hook sideways and just hold on to it. Tim reeled one in on the Ohio River. He got all the way to the top of water, didn't even have a hook on that fish when he seen us, so he opened his mouth, went back down, 30, 35 pound blue. They can clamp it hard enough to hold on to it all the way to the top of the water, or they can let go of it, and then that line goes slack, and you say, oh man, that was a good one.
Should you offset it?
Huh?
Should you offset it? Should you turn that hook a little bit to offset it to?
There's 2 or 3 schools on that. I turned mine one time a little bit too much, and we lost 3 fish in that tournament. Went back to just leaving them like they were. There's several different thoughts on putting a little more bend in that circle hook. A little offset I think is good. I think there's a point where you can get too much offset in it. Been my experience. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
On the double rig you're using, the hand size one, if you're using larger bait, you always put it on the bottom?
I do.
Okay.
And I typically will put a fillet and a gut on the top hook. I don't know why I do that. I just do that.
So
But
if you're using
one,
head,
sir?
head on the bottom and put your gut back or your
Yep.
fillet on the top?
I'll use my head or half skipjack on the bottom and my fillet up top. One reason for doing that, if I'm fishing, say 2.5 mile an hour current, it don't catch as much drag as the big bait up here and the smaller bait down here. That's a good question. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got one. Say you catch a big one, like you said, 100 or 50 pounder, and he ain't just gonna come right in. Say he runs to that brush pile and hangs up. Do you wait on him, or do you just cut your line and let it go?
That's a very good question, because number 13 was the first one we ever got in out of the 12 previous bites. He said, what do? You just let them go back in the brush pile, wrap you around a rock. What do you do? I don't know the answer to that, because we strummed the line on one. We hung at 8:30, and he chewed the leader into finally about 1 o'clock. We were so depressed we just went home. We never saw the fish. He would move over and down just a little bit. He jerked his head one time. When we got the leader in, there's about that much of it left, and it looked like you took a hacksaw to both sides of it, all 4 sides of it. He'd sit there, and we finally wore it in two. Another one was on 0 current in the Tennessee River, and we was zigzagging back and forth across the river. When he hit, he run up under a log. I felt him when he got up under it. I could feel him wedging himself under there. We pulled every direction. We strummed the line. We called people and said, hey, what do you do when you get one on? He's under something. I don't know the answer to that one. We tried everything. We pulled him this way, that way, strummed the line, dropped another hook down there and tried to hang him, and ended up breaking my line off. So I don't know the answer to that one. It took us 13 to ever get one in. And that fish, when he hit, I had 87 feet of line on my line counter. I had the rod in my hand anchored. I felt him. When he bit, it was just like somebody clamping a vise on my line, on my bait. He took off, went down the river, and I said, here we go. He stopped, he turned around. I felt him come back and nestle down. I really, truly believe the fish never realized his hook. When they're that big, Virgil Age, you've read about him, you've heard about him. I asked him one time after we lost a fish or two like that. I said, Virgil, how big is a fish when you can't do nothing with him? He says, oh, son. He said, they get about 75 pounds. He said, they get ornery. And from 75 pounds up, they get real ornery. Because at that time, he'd already caught at least 4 over 100 that had been weighed and recorded. So I had a good contact there. So 75 pounds up, they can pretty much, in other words, do what they want once they get hooked. You can bet on that, a blue cat or flathead or any of them. Yes, sir.
throughout the year, are you normally in the deeper areas of the river or the lake, or do you get shallow sometimes?
Very good question. And I'm gonna throw something extra in there. He said, throughout the year, what are you fishing? The deeper areas of the river? Yes, sir. I love deep water. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, it doesn't matter. 80, 100 if I got it. And another thing that I failed to talk about is water temperature is critical when you're drifting. I anchor when it's 48. When it's above 48, I try to drift. Sometimes I have to anchor to catch fish when it's above 48, but my preferred method, my favorite method, is have that pole in that hand, walking that bait down that river or that lake bottom, and actually feeling everything that's going on and feel that big tug on the end of the line. So yes, sir, I love deep water. I hardly ever fish below 30 feet of water in the Tennessee River. But that's not to say there's not really good fish shallower than that. I'm just not a skinny water fisherman, they say. Skinny water, them boys in Santee Cooper, they said, Bill. I said, what? He said, don't forget about the skinny water. I said, what are you talking about, Kevin? He said, you know that shallow flat out there with all them stumps out there. Them fish like to get up under them. So I learned at Santee Cooper to get in the skinny water. You learn from everybody. So that's where I learned that. Other questions? I wore somebody out. Looks like no hands coming up. Hopefully y'all have had a lot of fun. I did. And if you got questions, I got some business cards up here. If you want to go on a guide trip, if you're just starting out, I teach people from zero. And when I mean zero, when I hand them a reel, ambassador, they say, what's that? So that tells me as a guide that I've got to start at ground zero. Well, you got to put this in your hand, you mash this silver button, you watch that line counter. If I say we're in 40 feet of water, you let it go down to 36 or 37. And if the fish are biting, they'll catch more fish than anybody you ever carry fishing because they're listening to you. Okay? So that's the way that works. And then the wife goes with the husband. This is the best one. Hate to tell on y'all. So you get the wife and the husband out there and you're fishing, right? She starts whacking them. Why? She listened to everything I just told her. And she's doing everything I just told her. And I'm dipping her fish, and he scoots over there next to her and says, honey, what are you doing that I'm not? And I'm sitting there thinking, she listened and you didn't. And that's the truth. They will outcatch you every time because they're going to listen, they're going to do just, and they're not going to jerk the bait away from the fish. They're going to sit there, and that rod's going to nearly be in the water, and they're going, I got one. And then they're going to reel it in, right? That's the way it works, folks. We're hard-headed. I am, I'll admit it. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm hard-headed as that rock down there on the bottom. But them women will listen to you, and they'll make you the best fishing partner you ever had. You'll take a little time with them. Other questions? Anything? I thank y'all. This is a great event. I appreciate your time and attention.